Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're doing a deep dive into, well, the American character itself. We're going to look at these two huge, seemingly opposed forces, individualism and conformity, and track how they've interacted to lead us right into what's called the modern self movement.
And that's such a critical place to start because for you, the listener, it's important to get why this is so uniquely American. Most nations are held together by, a shared history, ethnicity, a common language, things that go way back.
And a kind of organic connection.
Exactly. But America was founded on ideas, on a compact.
On belief, not blood. So defining the American character isn't just an academic exercise, it's the glue. If that character changes, the whole country changes.
It fundamentally does. And whenever thinkers try to pin down that character, two things always come up and they're always in tension. A really fierce individualism and right alongside it, this powerful drive to conform.
And neither of those is unique to America.
Not at all. But what is unique, and this is an observation from Erik Erikson, is that here, these total opposites are just allowed to live side by side. There's no real discomfort with the contradiction. We're an amalgam of opposites.
So we don't try to balance them, we just
Right.
accept the tension. And that tension is what we're exploring. But to get to today's kind of narcissistic individualism, we have to go back to its roots because it didn't just come from one place.
That's right. There are two very distinct historical streams, and they create very different kinds of individuals. The first one is what we call Reformation individualism.
Okay.
This created a very serious, very intense person. Their self-reliance was tied, totally tethered, to a moral universe that was run by God. Their accountability was external.
To a divine source, not to themselves.
Precisely. They saw human dignity being made in God's image, but held that right in tension with human depravity, the idea that we're all, corrupted.
So that tension keeps you grounded, serious.
It does. You might resist the authority of the state or the church hierarchy, sure, but never the authority of God.
That feels a world away from the individualism we talk about now.
Yeah.
So what was the other extreme? The Enlightenment version.
Right. So Enlightenment individualism also champions the individual, but the whole basis of accountability it flips. It moves from God to the self. Duty is no longer about a moral obligation to a creator. Duty becomes self-duty, self-interest.
So you're not pushing back against the state because it's morally wrong, but because it's infringing on your right to choose for yourself, for your convenience.
Yes. And the sources we're looking at, they use some really stark examples to show the collision here. Think about a debate like abortion.
Okay.
The Reformation mindset would tend to refuse the act because it's seen as a moral wrong before God. It breaks that relationship. But the Enlightenment individual, they have far fewer qualms. The priority is the duty to the self. Personal choice becomes the highest good.
And that's a huge point our sources are making. It's not a political argument, but an illustration of how the moral compass just completely shifted from an objective authority to me.
Yeah. The anchor is gone. And that really sets the stage for everything that comes next.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. We have this individualist foundation, but then how did all the pressures of modernization, twist it into the self-movement we see today?
It was the cumulative effect of modernity itself. You have market economies, people flooding into cities, mass media, technology, and the result of all that was this profound alienation. People just couldn't form meaningful, lasting connections in the outside world anymore. Work became specialized and isolating, communities became transient, families scattered.
So if the outside world is breaking apart and feels unreliable, you have to look somewhere else for a sense of meaning.
You're forced to turn inward. That's the key. Fulfillment gets relocated from those external things, community, objective truth to sources inside the self. Life becomes psychologized. We start looking for reality in the, quote, states and vagaries of the self.
And some thinkers saw this as a really bad sign, culturally. I'm thinking of that good quote. Ages which are regressive and in process of dissolution are always subjective.
Wow, yeah.
That this self-obsession is a symptom of a culture losing its way.
It's certainly a retreat from a difficult, objective world.
Yeah.
But you can see the appeal, the idea that if you just tap into your hidden potential, your progress is unlimited. The self is the ultimate frontier.
And a gold mine for publishers, right? You mentioned some stats on that.
It's a huge market.
Yeah.
31% of all religious books sold are inspirational or motivational. Another 15% are new age, but on basically the same theme. It's a massive industry built on optimizing the self.
So this inward turn had to change how we even define what a self is. The whole concept shifted from something stable to something fluid, from
Right.
human nature to personality.
That is a massive conceptual shift. Historically, the self was defined by a shared human nature, a kind of core essence, of reason and potential. It was continuous.
Something you had.
Right. But the self movement replaces that with the idea of a shifting personality, of consciousness. Identity stops being about that continuous thread over time and becomes about the public image you project.
Especially after the 1950s, the 70s.
Exactly. That's when the sociologist Irving Goffman called modern people performers who stage their own characters and accomplishments. You need, he said, techniques of management impression.
That just sounds exhausting. I mean, if you're always performing, does that mean modern life requires way more emotional labor?
It absolutely does, because success isn't about what you actually achieve anymore. It's about how well you perform. The values just slip. Work isn't about tangible results. It's about image. We went from sweating to manipulating.
I can see that. That's why there's this explosion of jobs that are entirely about presentation. PR, marketing, image consulting. The value is all in the perception.
That is the perfect cultural symptom. We stopped seeing the world as a wilderness to be shaped and started seeing it as a mirror to preen in. We don't want to be respected for what we do anymore. We just want to be envied.
Okay, but we started this by talking about the tension between individualism and conformity. If everyone is retreating inward, how does the conformity piece kick back in? How does the outside world get a grip on them again?
It gets its grip through what's called the other-directed person. This is something thinkers like David Reisman and Christopher Lasch analyzed. This person gets their validation from an external, always shifting jury of peers.
So they're not inner-directed,
Yeah.
not guided by some fixed internal compass like the old Reformation individual.
No, they're constantly scanning the crowd, what's in, what's out. The inner substance has been hollowed out, so that void has to be filled by what other people think. And the perfect tool for that arrived in 1955 when television crossed the saturation point.
Television. It's the ultimate instruction manual for the other-directed person. It's a constant feed of what society says is important. The right clothes, the right opinions, the right lifestyle.
One writer called it the other-directed person's stream of consciousness. For the uprooted, fragile self, TV provides security by showing you the approved script. You conform by just adopting the narrative you see.
But there's a paradox here you mentioned, because the medium itself, TV, also seems to encourage this deep, private individualism. How does it do both at the same time?
This is so fascinating. It's in the technology of the image itself. TV images are really fragmentary. They have low definitional content, meaning they don't give you a lot of detail. And they're on screen for, what, an average of 2.9 or 3 seconds?
Not long at all.
And there's no logical, rational link between these quick cuts. So the viewer has to fill in the gaps. You project your own emotions, your own story onto those fragments.
You complete the image yourself so it feels intensely personal.
Exactly. It forces you into private interpretation. The screen becomes a mirror for what you already believe, and it feels like it's validating your own inner world.
And the sources had some amazing examples of this.
They're great. Think of the soap opera Dynasty in the 80s. Huge mainstream hit. But it was massively popular in the gay community for reasons most viewers probably missed.
Okay.
The lead villain, Alexis Carrington, she combined this very overt femininity with super masculine clothes. The severe lines, the huge shoulder pads, and the gay community saw a kind of sexual ambiguity in that, a reflection of their own complex world that other people just saw as 80s fashion.
They were reading their own experience into the image.
Completely. Or another one, Australian school children watching a show called Prisoner, about women in a tough prison. The kids saw themselves as the prisoners, their school as the prison, and their teachers as the wardens. They were mapping their own struggle onto the show's narrative.
So the medium allows you to pull whatever you need from it to reinforce your subjective reality, even if the creators never intended it. And that's a huge pivot, because that subjective, fragmented view of the world had a massive impact on religion.
A massive impact. This self-movement didn't just stay out in the secular world. It soaked into evangelical faith. And often, the faith adapted to the culture instead of challenging it.
How so?
The big shift was in prioritizing happiness and good feelings over, traditional morality or difficult objective truth.
So the big question changes from, is this true, to,
does it work for me?
right.
Faith becomes about personal experience, personal efficacy. Ministries start offering instant, painless access to divine results, all guaranteed by how you feel.
The therapeutic model. Like Robert Schuller.
He's the perfect example. Schuller famously redefined sin. It wasn't an offense against God that breaks your relationship with him. No, sin was just a lack of self-esteem. The message became, don't worry, be happy.
But wait, how does a religious tradition built on ideas like human depravity and the need to die to self even get there? That seems like a complete contradiction.
Because the modern, alienated, hollow self finds that old message too demanding. It's too hard. The therapeutic model is so attractive because it validates you just as you are. It tells you that your inherent goodness is the solution, not the problem that needs redeeming.
So the whole thing rests on an assumption of human perfectibility, which is a humanist idea, not a biblical one.
Absolutely. And sometimes this accommodation led to, frankly, some extreme examples of entertainment replacing reverence. You had the Phoenix First Assembly megachurch, which looked like a country club. The preacher used a chainsaw in a sermon. He flew to heaven on invisible wires. He rented kangaroos and zebras for services.
It's about amusing the self, not challenging it.
And the consequence for actual thought is, it's devastating. This whole psychologizing process, it just undermines the ability to think rationally. Reality becomes what you feel, not what is objectively true. And for the Christian mind, that's the end. Righteousness gets replaced by happiness, holiness by wholeness, and truth gets replaced by feeling.
So let's try to pull all these threads together. Individualism. Once you unhitch it from objective truth, from that Reformation idea of moral corruption, it just becomes self-absorption.
And ironically, that retreat inward doesn't create unique individuals. It creates the other-directed performer, totally dependent on the crowd for approval. You get this massive erosion of inner substance.
The paradox of the self-movement.
Yeah.
The hunt for self-fulfillment creates hollow men.
And while this quest for affluence and self-fulfillment has worked materially for America, our sources call the outcome quite lethal. And you just have to look at the stats.
They're pretty grim.
They're inescapable.
Yeah.
For all our prosperity and obsession with personal growth, America leads the world in teenage suicide rates, in drug consumption, divorce rates, depressive illness, and the final irony in the marketing of therapies to fix it all. It all points to this vast underlying unhappiness that just keeps feeding the machine.
So the paradox is that in this frantic search for radical self-reliance, we somehow destroyed the very capacity for it. We're left dependent on the crowd and the screen.
Which leaves us, and you, with one final thing to think about from all this. When thinkers warned we were emptying our world of God and of absolutes, maybe they were wrong about what would happen next. Maybe we didn't just leave a big hole in our inner lives. What if, instead, we instinctively, immediately, just rearranged our whole inner world to cover up that loss? What if we built a new, internal, subterranean God to fill that void? And if we did, the real question is, what hidden costs is that compensation inflicting on your own sense of meaning and your own connections right now?